Good morning, everyone. If you'll just follow the instructions that are on the screen, we'll get started in the next minute or two. We put in the chat. If you take your cursor to the bottom of your screen, it opens up a toolbar. There's a chat function there. In the chat, we placed, if you do not have certain functions like the reactions showing over on the right-hand side, there's a link to the most current version of Zoom in the chat. If you have anyone who's trying to get in touch with you, trying to figure out how to get on the meeting, there is a link directly to the meeting where the person will fill out a registration quickly and they'll be able to join. So Lisa, if you will, we'll get started with the presentation in the interest of time. So welcome everybody. We'll bring up the PowerPoint, the first slide on the PowerPoint presentation. Just letting you know that I am David Lawrence. If you don't know me already, I'm the chair of the Conference for Review Protection. I'm not sure if Janet Williams is on yet, but Janet Williams is our lead parliamentarian, and she will be leading the parliamentary procedures for the Assembly of Delegates of State Delegates session, which will be next Friday. And so, welcome you all. So that's not the first slide. Thank you. So welcome to the Assembly of State Delegates Orientation and Parliamentary Procedures session. We're presenting this live virtual, and it's also being recorded. The recording will be, again, empathable like other sessions. The recording will be empathable on the session card. And we've also loaded in on that card. If you go over and look on the right-hand side, there's a file tab. If you open the file tab, you'll see that the presentation has been posted there. Before we start though, I'm going to ask a favor, everyone, to only use the chat to direct questions to me or Janet. We'd like everyone to focus on today's presentation instead of the chat message stream. And Janet and I will answer the questions as they come at the end of the session. And by the way, you just never know when I might ask a question at the end, like a quiz. So just pay attention as closely as you can. Next slide, please. So the closing session of the Assembly of State Delegates is the closing session and Assembly of State Delegates is held on the last day of the CFP biennial meeting. For the 2020 biennial meeting, the session will be held on Friday, August 20, from 1 p.m. to 3:30 p.m. Eastern time. Make sure it's Eastern time. So what's your role as a delegate? The CFP Constitution bylaws defines the role of the Assembly of State Delegates as the body that approves or rejects all of council recommendations. What are council recommendations? Council deliberation of an issue submitted to the conference results in an action to either accept the recommended solution or take no action. When accepted, the recommended solution has been either accepted as originally submitted by the issue submitter or as amended by the council. The council's decision on the issue and the language of the recommended solution is sent to the assembly in the final issue packet. It then becomes the role of the assembly to approve or reject the council's decision during the Assembly of State Delegates session. Who presides over the Assembly of State Delegates session, you would ask? The conference chair and conference vice chair preside at meetings of the assembly. Who administers the parliamentary procedures? I spoke to that earlier. The lead parliamentarian for the biennial meeting of the conference administers the CFP's rules of engagement and the parliamentary procedures. The parliamentarian for our session is Janet Williams. and the chair and vice chair. In this case, Brenda Bacon, who's also on, is the vice chair of the conference. The delegates, well, that's all of you who should have, by the way, received your voting code in an email yesterday. The Constitution and bylaws designates 57 food regulatory agencies as members of the Assembly of State Delegates. These regulatory agencies with responsibility regarding food processing, food service, retail food stores, and food vending are required to submit to the conference executive director, Dave McSwain, the names of their delegates and alternates, if any, and the designation of the vote to which the person is entitled, whether one vote or a fraction of one vote. When all 57 food regulatory agencies are in attendance of the Assembly of State Delegates, there is a total possible count of 53.5 votes. Here's the math. The 50 states have one vote each, with the vote split when there is more than one state regulatory agency delegate in attendance. For example, in Virginia, the Commonwealth of Virginia, there are two regulatory agencies at state level, Virginia Department of Health and the Virginia Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services. Each of those have a half vote for a total of one vote for the state. There are 6 territories in the District of Columbia, each have 1/2 votes. So that's the math leading to the 53.5 votes. Next slide. So this shows again the conference flow chart, and encircled I have where the Assembly of Delegates function exists in that flow. And this is where the issues have been submitted to the conference, reviewed and finalized by the issue committee, assigned to the councils by agreement of the council chairs, and now they've worked it to your level as the Assembly of State Delegates. Next slide, please. This is the agenda for the meeting of the 2020 virtual biennial meeting of the Conference for Protection. Your preparation for the Assembly of State Delegates is crucial. I can't state that enough. We encourage you to become familiar with the issues in advance of the council sessions that will begin on Monday, August 16, 2021. Please attend as many council sessions as you can, but be aware that you cannot be in more than one Zoom meeting at the same time. If available from your agency, have others attend another council session. Attend the regulatory constituency caucus sessions to gain additional perspectives that will inform your decisions as a delegate. Your vote has an impact. The final action by the conference on each issue will depend on the vote of the Assembly of Delegates and the action as written in the final issue recommendation. Examples of actions include posting committee developed guidance documents to the CFP website, establishing new CFP committees, referring new charges to existing CFP committees, and that a letter be sent to organizations and agencies such as the FDA, USDA, CDC, and National Science Foundation, requesting a recommended action such as the request to the FDA to amend the most current version of the FDA food code. In turn, the agencies will review and can reconsider any material forwarded by the conference and will make every effort to respond in writing to the conference chair on each recommendation from the conference within 60 days of its receipt of the recommendation. In the case of the FDA, any recommendations accepted by the FDA are incorporated into the next version of the published food code. If the Assembly has voted to approve an issue with new or continuing CFP committee charges, then committees are formed and work begins that will result in issues brought back to the next biennial meeting. Next slide. So as far as the Assembly of Delegates session itself, we do a few administrative proceedings up front. Just knowing ahead of time that the session is transcribed. And by saying that, the executive director ensures that the proceedings of the Assembly of State Delegates is transcribed. That transcription is posted on the CFP website after it's been reviewed and approved. The conference chair will do the call to order, and I'll do opening remarks. You go back to that slide, please. Okay, thank you. And then there'll be a roll call by the executive director, and he will define the Constitution bylaws definition of what a quorum is. We'll have the executive treasurer, Cliff Nutt's report. And then the parliamentarian announces the number of votes required for a simple majority and for a 2/3 majority based on the delegates present. Next slide. So then the proceedings to the assembly votes themselves. During the closing session of the biennial meeting, the council chairs formally present final council recommendations to the Assembly of State Delegates. The delegates vote to either accept issues as recommended by the council or extract specific issues for further discussion. Part 1 of each council's committee report will be the issues where the recommended solution was accepted as submitted or accepted as amended by the council. Part 2 of the council's report will be the issues where the council is recommending no action be taken on the recommended solution for a reason specified by the council. For council 2, there will be a third part of the council's report. Part 3 of the council 2's report will contain all the recommendations for changes to the Constitution bylaws for the Conference of Fuel Protection. We break out those changes into part 3 of the council 2's report because they require a 2/3 vote from the assembly in the affirmative to pass. Everything else that you're going to vote on for this session requires a majority vote. Next slide. And I just mentioned extracted issues. Extracted issues is an issue extracted for discussion by the assembly, where the council's recommendation can either be accepted as written or rejected, so that individual issues pulled out of that part of the council chair's report and then voted on separately. In return, when a majority of delegates votes against a council recommendation to accept an issue, either as submitted or as amended, this leads to no further action being taken on that issue. If the majority of the delegates is against a council recommendation of no action on the issue, for a no action, the issue is referred to the executive board for consideration. The actions that may be taken by the executive board include a confirmation of no action on the issue, support of the assembly rejection with a recommendation to forward the issue to an existing or created committee to deliberate and resubmit at the next biennial meeting, and other appropriate actions as the executive board determines. Next slide, please. A very important part of the Assembly of State Delegates are the proposed resolutions that are presented by the Resolution Committee Chair, that will be Chirag Bhatt. Those are voted on as well by the Assembly. Next slide. Has Janet been able to join us?
Yes, I am here with bells on.
Thank you, Janet. Janet Williamson here. Thank you so much.
You were getting nervous, weren't you?
Okay, perfect.
Thank you. Sorry, everyone, for the technical difficulties, or as my daughter would say, user.
Enter your participant ID followed by pound.
Okay. Well, good morning, everyone, and thank you all for being here to such an important discussion. My name is Janet Williams. I'm with FDA, but I am going to be operating with CFP as one of the lead parliamentarian, and then providing backup for our 3 parliamentarians that we have out there. There's 1 parliamentarian in each council to support the council deliberations, and so they are there to help maintain the order that we have. You all should have, or you will find on the CFP landing page or the passable landing page, this rules of engagement, or the document. It kind of takes the fuzziness and all the information about what a motion is, what it requires, when you can do it, when you can't, and puts it on the table. And these are the ones that we are going to be taking a look at. We went over what each of these kind of mean and what they what they're asking for in the council trainings that we have. So just keep this with you as a point of reference. I do want to go back to a couple of things that David talked about a little bit, especially about the issues. Your role as Assembly of Delegates is to provide approval, acceptance, or alternatives to the council recommendations. That is not the Assembly of Delegates. While there is an opportunity for discussion, it is not the opportunity to re-debate an issue. And I don't want us to get bogged down in that. The Assembly of Delegates will say our representatives have been on those councils, and we are either going to accept the deliberations that they brought to the table, we're going to disagree with those, and then we're going to move that issue forward. When issues are extracted, that means that there is either additional information that needs to be put on the table, another opportunity for a discussion, not a debate, but another opportunity for discussion to try to get the brethren that you have in your assembly to vote in a different manner than what the council recommended. And we hear those separately because those should be far and few between, not every issue that we have there. When it comes to those issues that were recommended from the council to take no action for whatever reason that is, your role then is to say whether you agree with that recommendation or not. So if you agree with the council's recommendation to take no action, then you agree. If you don't agree with that council recommendation, then that is when it goes to the CFP Executive Board for an action, a committee, a discussion, something else, because it kind of is counterintuitive to say you agree or no. Something is up there, there's a no action, you're like, I don't agree with that, I do agree with it. So be very clear of what you're voting for. You are looking at the recommendation in front of you from the committee, and you are either agreeing with that recommendation or you're not. Just wanted to kind of make sure we were clear on that part. David talked a lot about this, taking an opportunity to look at the process and where we are in the process and what those rules are. Next slide, next two slides, I guess I should say. Next slide. We can go on to the next one. So this is where we were talking in the Passable, one back up please, and on the Passable platform where those documents are housed. Could you go one back please? Thank you. Where those documents are housed, if you see where the red line is under document library, the CFP document library will have those documents that I just talked about there. So if you haven't found them for yourself, they're right here in a uniform resource document for you to have and to download, put on another screen, do what you need to. Next slide, please. So next slide. See, it's not just me with technology. Voting will take place, and we're going to talk a lot about this process, on the Meeting Pulse platform, not the Pathable platform. The Pathable platform is that platform that we're using for the meeting sessions, for the council deliberations, but the voting is taking in another place in Meeting Pulse. So you have to toggle between both of those platforms to be able to do that. Remember, David reminded us we can only be in one Zoom committee at a time. So you're either going to have to use another device, a cell phone, a different laptop to be able to have this where you vote. And your vote is absolutely necessary and most important. There will be a vote time of 30 seconds. We will give everyone a 5-second warning by the parliamentarian that the voting will close. You can always change your vote while that vote period is open. And once the period closes, then that vote closes as well. And just to let you know, we have practiced trying to vote more than once, and the system does not record those votes. So I know that there are many people out there that would ask that question, but we did stress the system and try it out. The Meeting Pulse will document all the votes that are taken by the council through the council deliberations and as the Assembly of Delegates. Next slide, please. During the council deliberations, there are reaction buttons that we're going to use that are not going to be in meeting pulse. And we made this division for a reason, because there are some things that are reactions, just like you would raise your hand to signify A, or do a voice vote to say no or abstain. This is what those reaction buttons are going to allow us to do for efficiencies and for those things that really don't require a documented vote that's out there. And for those things that do, we're going to talk about which one those are. So those Zoom reaction buttons, spend some time to find out where that section is in your platform. The green check mark means that you are in agreement. Here's a green check mark here. The X, red X right here says I'm not in agreement. And then the abstain is an audible. We want to hear your voice say abstain. And then if you have information, always raise your hand. So get familiar with these reaction buttons. Those are the ones that we're going to use as a voting on some of those issues. And we're going to talk about which of those issues we're going to use the reaction buttons for, and which we're going to use the meeting pulse scored buttons for. Next slide. So the non-meeting pulse votes, those are the ones that we're going to use for the reaction buttons, would be to limit the debate, would be to extend the debate, end the debate, or adjourn. And that doesn't really require a lot of vote. If there is any discrepancy in the voting or the audible, the parliamentarian will call for a meeting pulse vote. And we're working with the contractor to make sure that we can get those things in there so that we can have a vote that we need to be recorded if there's something we have. So some of the more limited votes we'll have in here, like time for a recess, or how much time you're going to take for a recess, or to break for a discussion, things like that. Those are the non-meeting pulse votes. Next slide, please. For the motions for meeting pulse, these are the biggies. And this is where for the Assembly of Delegates, this is really an important aspect of it. So motions requiring the council reports in the part 1, there would be an issue from one of the Assembly of Delegates participants that says an issue recommendation, motion to accept Council 1 recommendation for part 1 of their report, or to accept part 1 of their report minus the extracted issues if there were any extracted issues. And it continues to go on for the part 2 recommendations for the part 3. Again, you might want to take this slide and make sure that you are familiar with this and that you understand these motions. Does that mean that every Assembly of Delegate will be making a motion? No. What we're going to ask is that when you're in your deliberations as the assembly, that you should pre-select someone to represent the delegates to make these motions and to second. That is just easier to get the process to the table and to understand, because in your deliberations, you would have already identified those issues that you wish to extract, or they are known. We know which issues you all want to extract, and we need to have a separate discussion of those. And this allows us to move that process along in an organized manner. If you recall at the in-person CFPs, it was usually that person that sat right there by the microphone that had the pleasure of making all of these recommendations, and they had a cheat sheet that they would use to be able to do that. So when you're in your Assembly of Delegates discussion and you're talking about all of the issues and discussing if there's any issues that the members may have, please identify a person or two that is going to make the motion and second that motion. And any delegate can extract any issue at any time. If you decide you want to extract an issue, then they should be prepared to come to that and justify that extraction during the debate. So while we are asking for a representative to make the motion, that does not prohibit you as an individual delegate from saying you would like an issue extracted and your reason for it. There's additional information We didn't cover this aspect of the recommendation. I think you would have bearing on the discussion. And then the same timing rules will apply. So if there are any questions about that, we'll take that at the end, but start thinking about who those representatives will be. Next slide, please. So meeting pulse. If you did not launch your voting mechanism prior to joining the meeting, we're going to ask that you toggle back to that virtual biennial meeting page in the Pathable. You're going to go to the full agenda and you're going to select the meeting session. And then we're going to start practicing on a vote.
So give everybody a few minutes to, or a minute or so to do that, if you'll go over. And Courtney reminded us, and thank you, Courtney, that that if you have your browser open, you should have your virtual biennial meeting tab, and you should have this meeting pulse tab. So if you click on the, go to the session tab in Pathable, that voting mechanism button will be there on this session today. And you can open that voting mechanism as it's shown here on the screen. Just click that button. That'll open another browser. So you should have two tabs in your browser. That's what you're going to toggle back and forth between during your session. Or if you're lucky to have more than one monitor, you can split those over to those two screens. Maybe have a third, have your chat over there, or whatever else you need to do your business in this. And of course, you do have the option still to go into the meeting pulse mechanism using another device, such as a cell phone. So whatever makes it easy for you to do this work. So this is why we're having this practice session today and going through this. So let's go to the next. So, and again, remind you all that you should have, if you're a voting member of the delegates, if you're been assigned by your state agency or your territory or DC, you have been sent a code to be used. That code will not be asked for today during the training session. It will be needed next week. If you also have a role on council as a voting member or an alternate who may have to step into the voting role on the council, or if your CFP region is holding an election to fill a position on the executive board, then that's when you would have had a reason to have a voting code. If you're doing one or more of those things, you'll use that same voting code for that. So we'll go to the next slide, please. If you've opened Meeting Pulse, you should have something that looks very similar to this. And this, again, this will be what actually shows when we use Meeting Pulse in real life at the meetings next week, at sessions next week. But it might now just appear as maybe enter a name or something like that. But whatever your screen looks like, it should be something similar to this. And of course, this is where you would enter your personal code. And that is unique, again, to you. Next slide, please. When a poll begins, you'll see this screen. It won't say anything right in it right now. I tried to black out. We used this slide in council. I thought by using the marker over that it wouldn't show on the screen, but apparently it did. But for the purpose of this, it's the assembly. You can return to the assembly delegate session by toggling back to Zoom. Then the results of the voting poll will be shared. So the vote will be held. The screen will pop up, and you'll see where actual votes are being tallied. The nays, the ayes and the nays and the abstains, that'll be tallied here. And then afterwards, we'll toggle back to the Zoom meeting. And in this case, it would be one of our conference direct staff who is going to display the results of that vote. When you're doing your votes on the screen, you will actually see, once you enter your vote, you'll actually start seeing numbers changing for the votes. That's other people entering their numbers, and there will be a total number of votes being cast. But after all that's complete, at the end of that 30 seconds, then we'll have the results, and that'll be put up on the screen by the Conference Direct support staff, and then the parliamentarian and I will determine what the outcome of that vote is. So now let's try it. Let's practice. We have some time here. And somebody has posed a question, where do I find meeting pulse on the site? Okay. Lisa, are you able to, in the site, go to the session, just take us out of this and go to the site and pull up where that, I know, and show them where it would be. We have time for that.
I think I'll ask Julie to pull up the screen share the site.
Okay, okay. So we'll take a little time to show you all where it is in Pathwell. I had not included this as a slide, but we have so many of you who have also participated in for other reasons in training sessions. So my apologies to those that are new to this. When you entered Pathwell, if you entered this meeting, you going into Pathwell and going and clicking on the session tab, if you click that, the session tab for the Assembly of Delegates orientation, you would see that voting, it should open, and at the bottom that would be that voting mechanism. You click that button to open meeting polls. Are we having trouble getting the site, Pathwell site up on the screen?
Yeah, I've got Pathwell up. This is Julie. Let me share the screen. I think my problem is, David, that I am an admin. So I
Okay.
do not have the same screen as you.
All right. And I'm not,
You need to share yours.
I'm admin as well, so I mean, I don't think I have it either. And Angie, you see no polls currently running because we have no poll currently running. That's why it's saying that on the screen. So you'll
Hey,
have a blank
David.
screen.
Do you want me to share my screen? It's Courtney.
Yes, let's allow Courtney to share her screen just to show us those of us who are not admin not able to show it.
Okay, hopefully this will work.
Okay. Could you go back to the agenda and how you got there, Courtney?
Yep, so if we go into the home screen of the biennial meeting, here, what I did was I just went to, you can either go to the daily agenda, the full agenda, or my agenda. I think today I went to the daily agenda, which is Friday, August 13th. For some reason, I don't know, mine doesn't necessarily always show when I go there, but I can get there by going down this way. Here we see Friday, August 13th for today, which is how I got into this meeting today. So I'll click on that. So now I'm in the Assembly of Delegates orientation, which is the agenda item that we are in now from 11 to 12. So you clicked here to join the meeting. To open your voting mechanism, you will click here. So once we click on the voting mechanism, like David said, and I think some people have already brought up, once you click on that, it is gonna right now say that there's no polls running, I'm assuming. So you should be seeing this.
Yep.
But when it is there, and I'm guessing you're gonna do a practice one, David, so they'll
Yes.
be able to see it there. So
Yes.
is that good? I can stop sharing now?
Would you show, well, and everybody at the top of Courtney's screen, she has a number of tabs up there. I think we're all pretty familiar with what a browser screen looks like, but she has the tab for the virtual meeting, biennial meeting there. And then she has and if she has two of them open now because she clicked twice on voting mechanism to help us. But that's where you would toggle back and forth in your browser. And I think you must be using Microsoft Edge.
I'm using Chrome, but yeah.
Okay, Chrome. So Google Chrome, Microsoft Edge, all those things that you've heard about through the various communications coming from CFP and from the conference direct team as to what the best practices are for how you're joining our sessions and our different applications. Please prescribe as closely as you can to those.
And like David said, it really will help if it's at all possible for you to have 2 screens set up. So I actually have 3 screens set up right now. So I have you guys on one screen. For the Zoom meeting, I kind of have the, the agenda and the Pathable site on another, and then my, my voting mechanism is in another tab. So it is helpful, but you can also have it open on your cell phone, like David said. But you are going to have to toggle in between the 2 for the voting mechanism.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Courtney, for sharing your screen and taking the team through that. Much
Yeah.
appreciated.
Hey, David, this is Pam. Can you hear me? Miles?
Yes.
In Virginia? You got 2 Virginia people.
Yes, I can hear you. I can hear you.
Under voting mechanism, so when the polls open, that's where we'll put in our code.
In the actual assembly next Friday,
Right.
that's when it will prompt you to enter that code. I believe it would be the first time you enter that voting mechanism for that session.
Got
You
it.
shouldn't have to enter it more than once, and then it ties, and then that code ties to your permissions to voting. And then when we run a report out of all the votes that everyone does, it would indicate through that for Pamela Miles, these are the votes that she made on these motions that were conducted in through a poll system in meeting polls.
Right,
So
thank you.
we'll have a record for eternity on the results of the outcome. All right, so we're ready to give it a practice. Let's do some practice with this. This is one of Janet's favorite, and it's actually a very good example. We go through a process of a motion to paint all cars blue or paint, and it's a pretty good way of simplifying, but clarifying the process for how motions work through council. So let's say that we've had an issue. The council chair's report includes an issue, and the outcome of that was the council accepted the issue as submitted to paint all cars blue. And when the conference direct team's ready, we will activate that poll, that voting poll in meeting polls.
Poll is live.
So we have the poll is live. And because I'm not voting, I can't see the screen, but you all should see. You should have seen the question come up. You should see your options for the responses. You should click one of those responses. You can test changing it if you like. That should, and again, as Janet said, that your vote still only count it once. Even if you change it from a yes to a no, it becomes that no. And that's the only vote that you have on that voting poll for that particular item. And Kimberly's on the edge of her seat for the outcome of it. So are we even and out in the votes coming through? Conference direct team? Again, I can't see
Yes.
that. I can't see that screen. Okay.
Yes, I can see them coming through. And you would just give a warning
Yes.
before the poll.
If this is
closes.
real life, we're going to have the timing. Again, we could have up to 57 of you participating in this vote, but the system is able to process all of that. So let's see. There are 58 votes in so far, according to Adam. Adam's one of our chat users. And let's go ahead and end the voting poll. And after that's done, the conference direct support will display the results on the screen. Look there, Janet. I think a lot of people like blue cars.
Very nice, very nice.
So Janet, how would you describe the outcome of the vote on this matter?
I would say the outcome and in favor of passing or of painting all the cars blue has passed the Assembly of Delegates with the majority.
All right. Thank you very much. Now, I don't have another practice scenario, but does anyone feel that they need another? I'm really looking at the delegates that are on this call. Do any of you raise your hand? Adam, you have your hand raised. Go ahead.
Yes, thank you, David. Just kind of wondering your thoughts. You know, you touched on it, the no action, the extractions, and the infamous triple negative. And I don't know if Janet might want to. Hopefully, we all build so much consensus during council that we don't have those issues. But just in case, would it be good to review a scenario like that, perhaps?
Are you talking about the scenario where there's the council determines no action and then it goes to the assembly extracts that issue and votes on and has a determination as to whether to support the no action or not?
Yes, I believe that is. Janet may be better to frame it than I am.
Okay,
I
Janet,
think what
would
he's
you-
asking is that if the recommendation from the council, and we can, do this on the fly, if the recommendation was on the council was to using that want to vote for the action, if the recommendation was the council was to a vote for no action, to accept the council's recommendation of no action to paint all the cars blue. And the reason is because we don't need to spend the money to paint those cars. So the council said, we agree, we don't want to take any action on this issue because we think that that's a fiscally irresponsible thing to do. So the council would then be voting on that, the delegates would vote on that council recommendation. Do you agree with that council's recommendation to take no action to paint the cars blue because it is fiscally irresponsible? And that's your vote would be, yes, I agree with that council's recommendation, or no, I don't agree with that council recommendation. You have to think of the no action issue, not as what the issue is, but your agreement or disagreement with the recommendation. And I think that's what trips people up. Go ahead, David.
and Conference Direct team, if you could, that slide 8 is where they did this. It's on that slide where we talk about the extracted issue and we have the two scenarios there. So if you again in the session card for the current session in the files is this presentation. So this is, and it has the speaker's notes with it. So it on slide 8 of that presentation is, so slide 8, please. That one. Thank you very much. So slide 8 and the speaker's notes, and Janet reiterated these and just gave us a good example with the blue car. This is basically it summarized. So just keep this in mind. Janet, if I'm stating it correctly, the assembly is, even with the extractor, is still considering to support or not support the council's recommendation.
That's exactly right. And I think that's the main thing that we need to get the delegates to remember. The council has done all the work. They've done all the legwork for you. And it's just like you doing all the work and bringing it to your leadership to have them sign off. You either gonna sign it or you're not. They're not gonna go debate the work again and debate how you did it or what. They're either giving you an approval or not approval or a signature. So your job is to say, yes, we agree with what the council recommendation was, or no, we don't.
Any other
David, I have
questions?
a,
Oh, go ahead,
David,
please.
this is Julie. I have a poll ready to go that is a motion to take no action if you'd like to practice.
Oh, sure, let's
Oh,
practice
okay,
that.
great.
So we'll have to state it maybe a little different. It's a motion to,
To accept the
Yeah.
council's recommendation of no action.
Yep. Thank you very much for pulling that practice together for us.
Yes.
So everybody, you're going to have that meeting pulse browser open, either on your computer or on your cell phone device. Or other,
So here's
other
the
device.
thing. If you voted initially that you agreed to paint all the cars blue, and now the issue is that the recommendation is to accept the council's recommendation to take no action to paint all the cars blue, then if you agree with that recommendation, then you vote yes. If you don't agree with it, you vote no. So we should, based on the previous votes, we should see more no votes than we see yes votes. That's a hint.
Adam's letting us know the votes are coming in.
People are gonna go out and buy blue cars all around America now.
I'm not big for clip art. Other people are. I don't use a lot of clip art in presentations, so I didn't do this. I almost put a car in there, and if I could have found an image of Janet, I think there's one in a picture somewhere, a group picture.
Yes.
There, waving outside of the car. So while that's going on, are we looking pretty good on that? Let's go ahead and end that poll, and we'll bring up the results, and Janet can provide us with the results of that. I like for Janet to do that because of the terminology, because that's then what goes in the into the record in the real scenario.
Yes.
We worked as a team in the assembly on this, as we do in the councils. So that she just has to pull up the right. Is it not working for you to pull up the
Yeah,
no
let
act?
me troubleshoot that because I am clicking.
Well,
the
we can
no
still, if you
action.
can just pull
Yeah,
up the other one, we can go from there.
this should be sharing. Correct.
It's
You're
sharing,
saying
is sharing the first,
the first
poll.
one.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's good things like this. This is a good way to test and see, this is happening during a training. It's a learning process for all of us. So that's why we do these sessions. And again, thanks for those who have provided through the chat or offered to share their screens for helping us when we didn't have access to that on our side. Does anybody remember what they saw as the last, as we were closing the poll, what the outcome was?
Nays carried it.
Nays
Yes, I was
carried
gonna say, I remember that. So that's a good example. So the results would be Mr. Chair, the results of the poll to take no action on the issue 1-2-34 fails. The Assembly of Delegates failed to pass that issue. So that issue would then go to the executive board for deliberation.
Exactly.
Because you agree with that. You thought skin flints, paint the cars. They got rust all over them.
So that's okay. That's okay if we don't see the results. We've been taught through it. Do I have anybody that has any? Well, what I do want to get the very last slide, and I can.
Here you go, David.
But I do want to do Q&A. I do want to do a Q&A, but.
Here it is. It's up now, David. The vote.
Okay. All right. Very good.
Here it is. Everybody sees it. So you see that the nays carried it. So the motion to accept the council recommendation of no action on this issue for the reasons specified fails. Because you want action on that issue. Okay? Hopefully that was clear enough. So when you're voting, think about blue cars.
It is a good way. I mean, it's simple but clear. Simple but clear.
Yes. Okay,
All
go
right.
ahead, David.
So the very last slide of presentation, and if you don't want to bring it up, it just says, what if you have technical difficulty getting the Pathable? So Pathable has system monitors, the backstage support. Most of them are going to have some identification. Those will be the ones that would respond to system technical difficulties live. If you go into the slide deck, I provided the email address for virtual@conferencedirect.com and the live support hours for next week for our sessions. We do have a waiting room so the delegates, I would like for you on Friday at the time of the session, I would like for you to begin joining the session 20 minutes before it's due to start. We need you all in there, and this is for the delegates. No other attendees will be able to join until 1 minute before we go live with that session. So 20 minutes before, I'd like all the delegates come in. It's no time for procrastination. Put on your calendar, pull everything ahead 30 minutes if you have to, because we want to make sure everybody's ready to roll into the opening session and the assembly of delegates. And again, just stressing that the tech support is available by email there. And we will do everything we can, including some people needed the direct Zoom link today to the meeting to join. Whatever we have to do to get you in, we will accomplish that. But we need you to try to join us 20 minutes before, so we can figure out what those technical problems might be. They seem to vary from session to session. I'm going to go back to my view and see if I have any hands raised, or if anyone has any. Do you have any questions? We have a few minutes for questions. The very next session starts at noon. Is it at noon? I always lose my calendar, but the next session is the first time attendee orientation.
It does start at noon, David.
Okay, and I would like to ask you all a favor. If you're experienced, if you're longtime attendees or you've attended Biennial meeting before, in the profile cards for all of our attendees. So if you go on Pathable, if you go to Who's Who, the very bottom, very last drop down is all attendees. That opens up people's profile cards. We have a first time attendee ribbon, we're calling it, for first time attendees. I'd like for you to take some time to engage a couple of those first time attendees. And you're able to do that out of Pathable by in that profile card in the upper left-hand side, there's a send message. Now the message that you will send will come out of Pathable as though it's coming from Dave McSwain, but it'll be very clear in the body of that email that it's from you. But I'd like for you to welcome a new attendee, perhaps it's a new member, to the Biennial meeting, offer your guidance, offer to be a navigator. In the in-person meetings we have, we're called navigators that are set up by our strategic planning committee. But this time we don't have that in the virtual setting. But I'd like to ask the experienced members of the assembly and anybody else in this meeting to take the time to do that and welcome. And as always, also thank a sponsor. We have the sponsors button ribbons as well. Take some time to thank a sponsor. We could not hold the meeting without our sponsors. And we will do a roll call at the start of the session. That was on the first slide, that roll call that Dr. McSwain does. That was in the chat from Janet. Again, she has to do the counts. Jamie Hernandez, please go ahead. Or Jamie Higley, go ahead with your question.
Hi, David, can you hear me?
I sure can.
Hi, just a quick question. So whenever someone speaks up to say they want to extract an issue, we don't vote to extract that particular issue, correct? We vote on we would then vote
That's
on
right.
the council's, we would then vote on the council's report without that issue, correct?
That's right. That
Okay.
would have, on the slide that have all the various motions that can be done, one of those motions is to vote on that part minus the extracted. You're absolutely correct, Jamie. Courtney?
Hey, David, I know we talked about this for council, but Are the delegates going to be renaming themselves on Zoom so that we know who is there? And I guess I'm asking, this might lead into another question, which is that I know we also have alternate delegates. And so I guess I'm just kind of wondering if the alternates are going to know when or if they are needed. For example, if our delegate is having technical issues, like when they're going to be brought in or something like that. So maybe a two-part question.
Okay, thanks, Courtney. So we do have a housekeeping slide specifically for the Assembly of Delegates. I'm not sure, Julie, if you have that slide available to show quickly. That was the one that in the green room, it was the first one you pulled up. But we do have a slide and it has the naming convention that Courtney's talking about. Because we want to separate the delegates from other attendees, because in this session, it's not as tricky with having it's regulators only, so we don't have to get into the naming conventions where people put their constituency in a parenthesis after their name. But basically,
David, no, I think we need to make it clear, as far as we're concerned, a delegate alternate has no status at this particular point in time. Only those individuals who have been authorized to vote will be those who were appointed as the delegate for their respective agencies. So if for any reason that needs to be changed from, the delegate that has been appointed to the alternate, they're going to have to let us know, because that is not going to be an automatic process, because we have a list of alternate delegates, but it's not readily kept, because we don't assume that we assume that if something changes to where the person knows in advance they can't attend either for work or personal reasons or whatever, they'll let us know. And so they will be replaced by the alternate, but would then be shown as the delegate, not the alternate delegate. So, that is not going to be just a real cut and dried process. So, but they're going to have to initiate that process. We're not.
thank you, David. So Courtney, we do have a housekeeping slide that'll show in that. We'll have it come up in the green room, so everybody will get those naming conventions, but it's not as complicated for this as it is for council. Sandra Craig?
Yeah, I was just wondering if you could quickly go over a situation where we would use the raise hand reaction button to vote instead of the voting poll.
So it'd be like, so it was that on that one slide where it was the motions not done in meeting polls to, so that would be the examples of.
An example would be like a vote to recess for 10 minutes. We would raise hands for that. Or a vote to have Janet, lower her volume on her computer because she's yelling at us, That would be an X because I don't yell, things like that. Simple things, nothing that's going to require a majority or a 2/3 vote or anything like that. Nothing major.
Did everybody see Adam? Adam put an X up there for a little bit. And what so and what the council, what we found during the council training sessions is that there's a tally of those checks and X's coming across on at the bottom for the participants display. So we can track that. The other reason, Sandra, would be to when I ask for a motion and a second, same as in the council sessions. If anybody when I'm asking for a motion or a second, I'd like that hand raised. And as Janet stressed early on, if the delegates can do some work along the process during the council sessions, during those regulatory consensus meetings to make the decisions as to who's going to do what, that'll really help us with that process. In person, you were close, you could determine that and say, I'm going to be obviously my table tent's here on this table. I'm close to the mic, I'll do it. But this being virtual changes things up a bit. I'm not sure if there are any other questions, but since it's right up on time to switch over for us to start beginning to go over to other meeting, it's important for us to wrap up now. I do appreciate your time today, and I hope it's been a learning experience for those, even those who are who have served as delegates in the past. And I look forward to seeing you during the process next Friday. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everybody. You all be good. See you next week.